I'm Craig Kenneth, a relationship coach and a psychotherapist. Every relationship is different and every breakup is different. Work with me and you'll get professional help on your situation. And if you're in no contact, focused on personal growth, my workbook series, The Knowledge, will help you make changes like you've never made before. Available now at AskCraig.net. Hi there, I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And today we're going to be talking about, did I do anything wrong? Well, when we're going through a breakup, I think we spend a lot of time focusing on what we did wrong, right? And we beat ourselves up about those things. And I think it's healthy for us to take a look at what we did in the relationship and really try and evaluate the things we did wrong. But I think it's also important to look at the things we did right.
Exactly.
You know?
And it's important to differentiate whether it was something that you did wrong or maybe something that was perceived wrong by others. So figuring that out for yourself is really important.
Yeah, wrong, right, it's subjective in many ways, right? Now, obviously, if you mistreat somebody, that's quote-unquote wrong. But, certain things one partner may not mind, other partners will. And so you have to kind of look at how you treated that particular person with what they liked or didn't like.
Exactly, and dissecting why it was wrong. Was it hurtful? Was it mean? Was it dismissive? Was it negligent? Yeah.
And so today we have an email coaching from somebody that asks, did I do anything wrong? And it's a pretty complicated situation. I will say that. So strap yourselves in for this one. This is from a guy who's in his mid-50s and he's dating a woman in her mid-40s. Now, he says they've been together 3 years, but have been friends much longer. Now, here's the thing. He says they've been together, but he was married and she was married. So they were having a long-term affair. Okay? And, I know relationships can be complicated and things aren't black and white in many ways, but ultimately, if you're really not happy in your relationship, and it gets to a point where it's like this for years, it's healthier for you to just walk away, because that person probably would much rather be with somebody who wants to be with them than be with somebody who's having an affair behind their back all those years.
Right, and we believe that integrity is worth it. Ultimately, everything will come to light. The truth seems to find its way to surface.
And it certainly does in this situation. Let's get to that. That's a good point. So he says, our status was mutually seeking a divorce. But was it mutual? We're going to find out. She decided to go back to her spouse, right? So it was more of him ready to leave his wife than her ready to leave the husband. He says, I was caught by my wife 2 years ago as having involvement with another. Okay, so there you have it. Just like you said, he got caught having an affair. And he says, I lived with her for 2 years, attempting to buy time for my beloved to make a move. That's kind of cringeworthy, isn't it?
Yes.
Because
it's buying time at the expense of somebody else's emotions, somebody else's trust, somebody else's fidelity.
That's right. Because you got caught. I think at that point it would have been much healthier for you to say, okay, you're right. I was having an affair. I haven't been happy. It's better if we separate, and we haven't been able to work on this. But instead, it's like he keeps using her. And I don't know the dynamics, if it was financial, if it was whatever, but it just makes you look even worse.
Right.
Than having just the affair.
And there's really never a right time to confess something as great as this. But the more time passes, the more deception is involved.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not good when you're hurting somebody like this and then you're using them, buying time, because you even described it as buying time. So it's not like we're trying to work it out and it's just not working out. It's I'm just buying time in this situation for her to leave her husband.
Right. And it also seems to be cyclical. There seems to be a pattern here. This doesn't seem like it's the first time that it's happened. And I would be really curious to know what the underlying issues are. What is his relationship with his spouse like? Not that cheating is always a result of, something going wrong in a relationship, or else everybody would have reasons in their pocket to pull out about why they deceive anybody.
Here's my scroll of reasons.
Right. Because you didn't do the dishes, that means I can go out with Samantha tonight.
You were snoring last week.
But I am curious to see what their dynamic was like. Was it an issue of boredom? Maybe he needed a certain level of novelty in his life. There was something that wasn't being expressed before the decision to cheat, and I wonder what that was.
Yeah, and he needs to really look at that closer. But let's see what happens here. He says her fear was that her spouse was going to be volatile in learning of her decision to depart the relationship. She was also concerned about her children. All right, so she's afraid this guy's going to be volatile. Now that's important to keep in mind here, right?
And she also mentioned her children.
Yes, also important. Both of those factors are going to come up. He says, after 2 years, I no longer could stand for her living two lives, so I informed my loved spouse that I was that guy.
Ugh.
So he went and told her husband that she was having an affair. Remember, this is a guy who is volatile, and she's afraid to leave him, and he goes and tells her. That's putting her in danger. Okay, so that's scary.
Right, and it also sounds like this was very self-serving. This was about his own interests, his own needs, what he wanted. There was also a degree of him attempting to punish her. He said that he couldn't stand her living two lives.
Yeah.
It's a bit of projection that's happening here, where he's able to see her lack of character throughout the situation, but struggling to realize that he's involved in the same exact thing.
Yeah. Let's keep going here. This occurred shortly after her father passed. So not only does she have to deal with the loss of her father, now she's got to deal with a volatile husband and her affair partner going behind her back, violating that trust. Okay, and exposing that relationship. That's a lot. I mean, it'd be very hard to trust him after doing this. Right? Because now her health, her safety, and the kid's safety is at risk with this guy.
Right.
Because he sounds very dangerous, right? Shortly thereafter, her spouse became abusive. Oh, he finds out, now he's going to abuse her, right? He threw a shoe at her face, made her walk home from a restaurant, pushed her from a moving car, and called her a whore in front of her kids and told her to get out. Now, if you're her, you're going to kind of be blaming him for this. Right? And you could see why, because if she wanted to end that, marriage, fine, that's okay. But for you to expose her like this, this is dangerous. I mean, look at how violent this guy got.
Right, and even though it isn't directly this man's fault that her husband is abusing her, he does have a part to play. He was warned that this man can be violent.
Yes.
And so knowingly...
He knew it.
He knew it, and he shared that information.
Yeah, he knew it. Yeah, none of that sounds healthy, right? This all sounds so complicated. All right, early in the summertime, she arrived at my home. So she finally does leave the husband, right? I guess because the husband threw her out. He said, get out. So she goes to move in with him. A place I purchased to be with her, renovated and furnished. I left my family and my home for her. So maybe he has kids too.
It's possible.
Because he said family, and I don't think he had mentioned that he had kids. She came very enthusiastic to be with me. So finally, the fantasy, right? I finally get to be with this guy. I've left my husband to be with this amazing guy who I've been with. Although, there's lots of red flags with his behavior here.
Right.
But she went. However, after a couple of weeks, it became obvious she missed her children terribly. Yeah, and can you imagine her kids are at home with this guy, it sounds like? Like, why are the kids not with her?
Right.
Right? Like, they're with this abusive, toxic guy who was violent? I'd be worried about them too.
And it seems like she's in a bit of survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like she might have been afraid to leave him at all.
Yes,
And
I
now
agree.
that she's finally on this other side, of course she's enthusiastic to be able to be somewhere, to be held, to feel somewhat safe, even if it is with somebody who does have a lot of concerning behavior as well.
Yeah. So what happened? She also was maintaining contact with her soon-to-be ex. Well, they have the kids together, so they have to have some contact there. Long and the short, into the end of the summer, she announced she doesn't belong with me, but should be with her kids. She announced that she was going home, not for him, but her kids. Not sure why the kids weren't with her. And then, why didn't they go? It's very confusing.
I mean, who knows how the spouse would have reacted.
Yeah. Hard to say. Mm-hmm. I invested heavily financially and otherwise for our future with her. She left me to go back to her spouse, who also slept with 6 women to get back at her. I have felt that she has borderline personality and codependent. Meanwhile, her spouse is a narcissistic sociopath.
Oh, these are a lot of terms thrown out here.
Yes, they are. And if you thought he was a narcissistic sociopath, then don't you think you should have really thought more thoroughly about what was going to happen when you expose the affair, putting them at risk? I mean, that's scary.
Yeah, and you're also trying to assess her behavior when she's in an extremely vulnerable position. Mm-hmm. She's acting in whatever way she needs to survive at this moment. Her kids are with this abusive man. She doesn't know what's going on. It sounds like she struggles to make a decision in general. To say that she has borderline personality could be a jump. She's not my client. She's not your client. She's not this man's client. But,
these are some extreme definitions, terms, however you want to look at it, that you're throwing out there. And to say a sociopath, that's even more concerning. I mean, sociopaths are, obviously very rare. I mean, that's not something... I mean, even Margaret has said she's only seen one true sociopath, and she worked in the prison system for many years. Okay? He says, I went to school to be a psychologist. All I can think is that her anxiety and her insecurities could not flourish in a non-controlled environment. Her makeup felt more secure in a command and control environment despite the emotional and psychological abuse. Is there anything I did wrong? What can I do to get her back? Okay, well, you've never really had her, okay? You guys had an affair, and I'm not saying she doesn't have feelings for you or didn't have feelings for you, but she was always married to somebody else, and you were always married to somebody else, or at least the bulk of this relationship. So this has never been 2 people in a committed relationship, which is a very different dynamic when you're seeing each other on a regular basis and you're building a foundation. Then you are sneaking out of the house to see her. She's sneaking out of the house to escape this really toxic home environment. That's very different. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't form a one-on-one connection with her, but you haven't yet. And until the husband is out of the picture, and it sounds like your wife is, would you really even be able to see, can we have something just one-on-one? That's a very different dynamic.
Exactly. And going back to the question of, did I do something wrong? When you see the consequences and the effect of this, look at how much pain was caused. How many poor decisions after the other led to people being hurt in ways that, maybe you could or could not predict.
Yeah.
That's not even to mention the emotional damage that has occurred here. Both infidelity, physical abuse, worrying about children, kids are in danger. There's so much to this story.
Yeah. And while you may have had some good intentions in certain ways in trying to help take care of her, I don't know the situation with the kids, why they didn't come along, or I don't know any of that. It would be a huge component of how mature this was handled, right? Because who would want to leave their kids with a narcissistic sociopath? And I'm not saying that he is. I mean, doesn't mean he's a great guy, but, I don't know if he's a narcissistic sociopath either. Exactly. I mean, we don't see... Yeah, he sounds abusive, for sure. So obviously this is a very complicated situation. And if I was you, I wouldn't try and go back to having an affair with her. Because now that the husband knows about the affair, he's going to be even more scrutinizing of where she's at, what she's doing. So I think that relationship that they had before he found out is not going to happen again.
Right.
Right? Because the husband is onto it.
And there also seems to be just a nice hint of misogyny in this entire story, saying that she needs to be in this controlled environment and also blaming her for a lot of what has happened. When he didn't get what he wanted, he tried to punish her by telling this other man.
Yes, that's a good point. And I think he was anxious and acting selfishly when he did that.
Mm-hmm. And I think a really good question for him to ask himself is, how much do you respect the women in your life? I imagine that if you respected your spouse to a degree, that you would let her know what's going on in your world, that you would respect her enough to let her know the truth. And likewise with this woman, if you respected her enough, would you allow her to make her own decisions, even if it wasn't what you wanted?
Yeah. I think at this point, the healthiest thing for you to do would be to leave her alone and just to say, look, I don't want to have another affair. If things don't work out with your ex or your husband and you want to come back and repair things with me, then we can try and start something healthy and start from there. Mm-hmm. But I would try and really establish trust and a healthy communication and looking at maybe where things weren't going so well or what wasn't healthy about the situation, and make sure that you are going to have something healthy and that it can be healthy.
And I think there's a long road ahead of you. I think it would be very healthy if you did have feelings of guilt and remorse from that. That's really what I would need to see in this situation to even think to believe that a healthy relationship would be possible because of how much damage was caused here.
Yeah. Sometimes things like this happen and we don't go into things with the bad intentions and such. But ultimately, if you don't try and start a situation from a healthy place, then things like this wind up happening, and a lot of people wind up getting hurt.
Right, and I think it is really important to ask that question that you asked in this email. Is there something that I did wrong?
Yep.
I think we should constantly be asking ourselves, not in an attempt to find mistakes or find things that are wrong with us, but just to make sure that we are treating the people around us as we would want to be treated.
Yeah. A lot to think about for this situation, and hopefully he takes a good look at himself and figures out who he wants to become after all of this and how to get to a good place. It sounds like he's at least starting to do that. Mm-hmm. So hopefully this has been helpful to you guys. Of course, if you want to get our help personally, you could do that on my website, askcraig.net. I do email coaching and I do Skype, and Coach Victoria is also available.
I'm excited to talk with you.
Just click on her name on the top of the website to schedule with her or I. But that's it for this video. I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And we will talk with you soon.